MC family, and happy Monday. There's something I've been thinking about today that I wanted to share with you, and I hope it'll be an encouragement to you. And it's about the parable that Jesus has in Matthew 25 with the master who is going away, and he gives his servants these tasks. One servant gets 5 talents, and the other gets 2 talents, and the other gets one. And you know that a talent is not some special gift or ability, it's actually a unit of money. So each of the servants gets 3 different things. Then he goes off. When he comes back, he calls them to find out how it's going. And the first 2 do well, and then the third servant doesn't do very well. And I think a lot of sermons and teachings kind of focus on that third servant who didn't do well. And we say, don't be like him. But I want to focus on the other 2 because Jesus says something really interesting to them, I think. He says, well done, good and faithful servant. You are faithful over a little, I will set you over much. And there's this idea that because they were faithful with what they have this reward, which is being set over much. And so what is that? Well, if nothing else, it's an increase in responsibility and authority. And that makes sense. But specifically, we're not told in that parable what that really looks like. But I think we can get a hint if we look at it. Something else Jesus said at the end of the Bible in the book of Revelation. Jesus is dictating letters to these different churches. You'll know that in the first 2 or 3 chapters of the book of Revelation, Jesus is dictating to John. He says, to the church of so-and-so write this, and to this other church write this. And there's a church in Thyatira, and Jesus says, John, I want you to write this. He talks about what's going on in that church, and he says, okay, nevertheless, hold fast to what I have given you until I come. To the one who conquers, I will give you authority over the nations. Specifically, it's to the one who conquers and keeps my works. I will give you authority over the nations, and you will shepherd them with a rod of iron, he says. So what Jesus is saying is, if you are faithful and you keep my works, and I'll talk for a second about what I think those works are, then I will give you something. I will give you authority over the nations. And I don't think that's some abstract or metaphysical concept. I think Jesus is really saying, I will give you authority. You will rule and reign with me. Because that's why human beings were created, to be co-rulers with God over his creation. That's why it makes sense for him to say, I'm going to set you over much. That's why we're created. So Jesus is saying, I will give you authority over the nations. And then he says something really crazy. He says, and you will shepherd them with a rod of iron. And that's a quote from Psalm 2, which is applied to the Messiah. That's a messianic psalm. And that's why it's so crazy. Jesus is saying this idea of shepherding the nations with a rod of iron, which is applied to the Messiah, I, the Messiah, am applying it to you. Not only does the Messiah do that, but his followers do it also. So we have this promise, this reward that Jesus is offering to us to co-rule with him, to be faithful over a little and then be given much. And what we have to do is to conquer, to continue doing the works of God. And what are those works? Jesus sums it up for us. He says, you love God and you love people. And that's what is meant by doing the works of God. So this time, this lockdown, we're at the end of week 3 and we're going to go into week 4. This is an audition for us. This is a tryout. This is God saying, I have a role for you to play in this thing called the kingdom of God, and I want you to be ready for it. You'll start with something little, and I'll give you something big. And so our challenge is not to just hunker down and try to endure it and just hope it passes over and we survive, but our job is to thrive, to continue to conquer, to do the works of God, to be faithful with what we have, and then that's the reward that God has for us, to rule with him in the kingdom of God. So let's be faithful. Let's continue doing the works of God and continue to build his kingdom until he comes.